Oh, hold on, my phone's going crazy.
What happened? You don't want to
I want to look into it. Yeah, it worked, and then I went back.
Okay.
This is the 4, I think.
The 6 on it. Here's the deal.
Okay, Rabotai. Yossi, you want to help me out?
Everyone, please give your attention to
Okay.
Mordechai.
So first of all, Hazak Baruch to all the people. We have 5 people Mitziyum. How many people? 5? Hazak Baruch to the people of Mitziyum. It's a big inspiration, and it's a big mitzvah. I think I told you guys. Who did I tell? Yariv. I told you guys what the Vilna Gaon says on the word Siyum. Remember this? Yisrael, you listening? You're listening? The Vilna Gaon says, why dafka as Siyum? Remember the Sitai? Why dafka as Siyum? If you just participate, it's like you celebrated in the Siyum. Like at a Pesach, you just participate in the Siyum, it's like you did it. And then what else in Judaism? You just show up, and it's like you did it yourself. And so the Gemara says, the letters of Siyum, Samach, Vav, Samach, Yod, Vav, Mem. If you spell each letter, Samach, spell it. You have the Samach first, and then the Mem and Mechaf. Samach is 60, Mem and Chaf is 60. The inside letter is exactly the same. Vav, Yod, spell Yod. Yod, Vav, Dalet. Yod is 10. Vav and Dalet is 6 and 4 is 10. Remember this? Vav, Vav, 6, 6, and Mem, 40, 40. In other words, if you're just on the inside, you're not the one talking about the Siyum. You're just living in the background, listening. It's just like you were in the Siyum yourself, says the Gra. So it's a big Yom Tov for all of us, and it's a big inspiration that we should all take from here to learn as much Torah as we can. We were talking about, the question was, are you allowed to swim on Shabbat and Yom Tov? And so we're going through the different options from Chacham Yitzhak Yosef. Just to quickly summarize where we went until now. We said there were a few things that we were suspecting maybe is an Yisur Shabbat. Number 1, is it a problem of exercising and sweating on Shabbat? Chacham Yitzhak says, well, not really. Swimming on Shabbat is not really a problem of hitamilut, of exercising on Shabbat. Second one, it says in Mishnah Beitzah that you're not allowed to swim because you might make a raft. However, like the Rambam writes, and like the Gemara that we're going to read tonight says, that's only talking about if there's no lip on the pool. If there's a lip on the pool, it doesn't have a deen like a nahar, it's not like a river, and therefore the hashash, that maybe you'll make a raft, doesn't apply, and we'll do that Gemara tonight. So there's no problem that you might make a raft. Hashash number 3. Maybe it's sihita b'se'arot harosh u'azakan. Maybe it's squeezing the hair. And we said, according to the Rambam, it's actually the Gemara on Shabbat that says really there is no squeezing of the hair from Shabbat. Mideoraita, there is no such thing as squeezing sihita with the hair because the hair is not soaked inside the hair. The water is not soaked inside the hair. The water is in between the hair. Yes, you may have an Yisur de Rabbanan, but a Yisur deoraita of Shabbat of sihita on a hair, you would not have, and Rambam says this, halacha ma'aseh. The 4th hashash, maybe it's tilishat hasa'ad, maybe you're going to pull out a hair, and we did this a couple of weeks ago, we said, even if you pull out a hair, it's only at best a midrabanan, because mideoraita, if you pull out a hair, it has to be with a proper hair cutting machine. But if you just pull out a hair stam with your fingers, it's only Yisur D'Rabbanan. The next hashash was, if you use a towel, maybe you're going to squeeze the towel. We said it's not a hashash to squeeze the towel. The next hashash we said was the bathing suit. Maybe you're going to squeeze the bathing suit. We said, well, not really, especially if the bathing suit is made out of nylon. These days, the bathing suits are made out of nylon. They don't absorb water. So it's not a hashash of sehita for the bathing suit mideoraita. The next one, it says if you leave something in water on Shabbat, even without detergent, it's like you're cleaning the beged on Shabbat. So if you put the bathing suit in the water on Shabbat, you're cleaning the bathing suit. Chacham Yitzhak says, not really, you're not doing cleaning. First of all, the bathing suit's not dirty. Second of all, it's the derech to put it in water. And he says it's not a hashash that you're doing laundry with the bathing suit. The next hashash we're going to talk about now. So far we did 7 possible Hilulei Shabbat, and we said not really. Each one of them is not really a big hashash. Here comes the big one. Gemara on Shabbat, page 40a. If you have it here, Mem Amud Aleph. It's towards the middle. It's like, I'm going to use the R Scroll so I have the English translation that everyone can agree on. And we have Tanud Abanan, it's like in the middle of the page. Tanud Abanan, we learned in the Berachah. Mirhat Shepakikun Nikabav Me'erev Shabbat. A bathhouse, which is that they used to use, they used to go to the bathhouse, right? If you have a bathhouse that it has hot water, but they close it up. They close the vents before the Shabbat. So there's no hot water going to be on Shabbat. All the hot water is closed up. Then you cannot use that hot water on Shabbat, but you can use it Motzei Shabbat immediately. You don't even have to wait, even though the water was hot from before Shabbat. What if you close the vents of the hot water from Erev Yom Tov? On Yom Tov, you can come and steam bathe. You can't take an actual bath, as the Mishnah Gemara says. You can take a steam bath, like a sauna, right? There's a sauna, like a sauna, like using just the steam. Then you can wash yourself out on the outer chamber. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, there was a bathhouse in Bnei Brak. Someone look at the, I can buzz it, Yaniv. Which, front door or back door? Okay, it's open. Ma'aseh b'minhasha Bnei Brak. In the bathhouse in Bnei Brak, pakikun nekabav me'erev Yom Tov. They closed the hot water vents before Yom Tov. And who used the bathhouse the next day? Nemahan nechnas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'Rabbi Akiva ve'eziro bo. The next day, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they come to the bathhouse and they take a steam bath on Yom Tov. Not with the actual hot water, just with the steam. And they came out and they rinsed off in the outer chamber. And the tub of hot water was covered with boards, so you couldn't access the hot water, so it's no problem to use the steam on Yom Tov. When the rabbis heard about this, they said, they would be allowed to steam bathe on Yom Tov, even if it wasn't covered with the beams. So that was a humrah, an extra humrah. Now this is the main point of the inyan. Listen to this close. As the sinners kept on sinning, when people kept on sinning, the rabbis decided to make more stringencies. They make more things asur. What did they make asur? Regular bathhouses was not allowed because people were sinning. We'll explain what this means in a second. However, a bathhouse in a big city, which is a very, very big bathhouse, you can stroll around in the steam, no problem. But a bathhouse in a small city, you cannot. What does it mean they were doing sins? This is how the isur of bathing on Shabbat came about with hot water. People used to take baths on Shabbat with hot water that was hot heat already from before Shabbat. Imagine you filled the urn with hot water before Shabbat, and then you pour it in the bathtub and you take a bath on Shabbat. People used to do this. Hithilu habalanim, and the rabbis allowed this on Shabbat. Hithilu halabanim na'hem b'Shabbat v'omrim me'erev Shabbat tuhamu. The people who worked at the bathhouse, they started to lie, and they would heat up the hot water on Shabbat and say, "Come take a bath." What? This hot water? I keep Shabbat. Was it heated today or yesterday? It was heated yesterday. Lying. It was heated today, and people were making sins. So what did the rabbis do?
So people who were heating the water.
That's a great question. The Mefarshim all talk about this. Who was the one making the sin? The attendants or the people? Great question. You always hit the nail on there. Asru at-tahamim. What the rabbis do? They said, you know what? Announcement in the shul. No one is allowed to take a hot bath on Shabbat, period. I don't care when the hot water was heated up, before Shabbat, on Shabbat. This is a Isur de Rabbanan. So this is something good to know. Why can't you take a hot bath on Shabbat? You can't heat water on Shabbat, obviously. You can't use esh on Shabbat. But if someone says to you, if someone told you yesterday, you're a Jewish person, right? I have a question. Why can't you take the urn and pour it in a bathtub and take a bath on Shabbat? What's the answer? Is it Yisur from the Torah? No. It's a Yisur midrabanan. Why? A gezerah. It's a gezerah. Asur tahamim. Ve'etilu et aziyah. But they made an announcement, we are still allowing saunas on Shabbat. You just can't take baths. Saunas already, they said it's okay. They're not afraid that the attendants are going to turn on the hot water on Shabbat for the sauna. The sauna is just the steam from the fire that's running all the time. So they said you can come into the bathhouse.
You have to add water to it.
From before Shabbat. Shabbat.
Put water. It's not going to work.
I don't know the old days. I don't know what they do with the sauna in the old days. They said you're allowed to take steam baths. What was happening? The people will go to now this one shows the people were sinning. The people will go to the bathhouse, they come out all wet. They say, hey, what you doing there? I took a sauna. They really took a bath. The people will go in the bathhouse on Shabbat and take a bath on Shabbat. So they didn't listen to the rabbis. So what do the rabbis have to do? They said, no, we're only taking sauna baths. So the rabbi said, okay, we'll lay down the hammer harder. Asru lahen et tazi'ah. They made an announcement, no more saunas on Shabbat. Because you guys keep sinning, you don't listen. No more saunas, no more baths on Shabbat.
It's not a concept of
Very good.
They can't.
The Gemara is going to say this right now. Very good. You learned this Gemara already? You want to say it right now. And they said, the only water we'll let you use is Hameh Tiberia, the hot springs of Tiberia. And then Mefarshim say also Hameh Gerar or any other hot spring that's completely natural, nothing to do with man-made because there's no gezerah there. You're afraid of people fooling around with the hot water. People were still showering with man-made hot, fire-heated water. No, Hameh Tiberia lahatsu. There's Tiberias. I got this from the Tiberia hot spring. It said, no more Tiberia baths. No more on Shabbat, nothing. The only thing you're allowed is a cold shower on Shabbat. They saw the people couldn't handle this. No one was, as we can see, people kept breaking the law. It was too strict for the people. They weren't listening anyway. They went back one step. They said, fine. We'll re-allow Hameh Tiberia. We're not re-allowing the baths on Shabbat, even if the water was heated from before Shabbat. So the Gezerah of the Hachamim is, as we see from here, Ze'ah bimkoma omedet. The only thing you're allowed to do is take the Tiberia hot springs there. Now, we call them sinners. So the Gemara says, Amar Abba, Hai man de'avar ad Rabbanan. We learn from here. If you transgress just the rabbinic enactment, you're called a sinner. You're allowed to call someone a sinner. The Gemara says they're sinners. Hai man de'abad Rabbanan, Shaarey Yerushalayim. Someone who transgresses the rabbinic thing, you're allowed to call him a sinner. The Gemara says. We learn from here. Come on, like who is this? Yaitana, like this Tana that we just said, that called them a sinner because they were bathing on Shabbat. Now the Meiri, I'll just read you one Meiri real quick. The Meiri says, in his word, Kaval Yadata, you already know. Shilashon hara migune biyoter. It's not nice to talk bad about people. Umikom akom, however, kol shemisapero kedel lehavish mi sheshema'otav ra'ot umisaper beganoto kedel leharchika achirim me'alav shelo lelmod me'asav tabo alav beracha. If you speak about someone in order that everyone else learns from his mistake and doesn't copy him, you should be blessed. That's not Lashon Hara anymore, says the Meiri. Even if it's only a rabbinic thing that he violated. Mutar likroto abaryan. You can call him abaryan, a sinner. I'll talk about what he did bad. Without the rabbinic gezerot, the Torah will never last without the rabbi's fences. Someone who disrespects the rabbinic laws, kenogea bebavat eina shel Torah, like you're touching the pupil of the Torah, the apple of the eye of the Torah is the rabbinic is what Meir's words are very, very strong. So we see from here, this is the origin of the isur of bathing on Shabbat. Why are you not allowed to light a fire on Shabbat? Because you can't make esh on Shabbat. That's easy. Go back. If I have a fire that was warmed from Erev Shabbat, why can't I use it? Really, you should be allowed to use it. But it's a gezerah, maybe you're going to end up warming up the water on Shabbat itself. So even if you have water heated up from before Shabbat, you cannot take a shower with this water on Shabbat. It's called washing on Shabbat.
About solar heating.
Great question.
Well, I mean, with that reasoning, you give to
No, this is only for bathing.
just bathing.
Because, and that leads to his question. Why? Because it's the balanim. It was the attendants. Like I say, these days, there's no more attendants.
So if somebody makes your coffee, you're not letting
The barista.
But the food
Now-
is not heated, right?
Hold on. We got to get there. Hold on. Rambam, and we'll get to the solar question in a second. These are the words of the Rambam. Maimonides. Now remember, the Rambam said you can swim in your pool on Shabbat. We have to see what was the Rambam talking about. Mithamim Adam. Here, this Rambam says exactly what we just learned. This is chapter 22 of Rambam.
So when Bob is after this,
Yeah. Why are you not allowed to bathe on Shabbat? Because of those attendants, those tricky attendants. They lied and they said they did it before Shabbat. You can't even go there for a sauna anymore because of these guys. They made a decree. I know he likes me in this part. It's okay. It's like a Gilgul of someone.
yeah.
They made a decree. You cannot wash your entire body with hot water on Shabbat. Even if it was already warm from before Shabbat. Your face, your hands, and your feet is allowed. Allowed what? You can't heat the water on Shabbat for that. Your face and your hands and your feet is allowed with water heated from before Shabbat. Okay? So far, so good? Mithamim Adam Keneged Medura. That's the next piece of the Gemara. So let's go forward. So the Gemara says, so now we understand this is the Gezerah of the rabbis. Now the Gemara says, Tanur Banan, Mevi Adam Kiton Maim Umaniho Keneged Medura. You're allowed to bring a pitcher of water and put it near the fire. You know, you can't put liquid on the black, right? Nobody warms up soup on Shabbat. Although according to the Rambam, you're allowed to. The Rambam holds you're allowed to warm up liquids in Shabbat. And the Timanim follow Rambam. Yair, do you put soup? Ask him if he warms up soup on Shabbat. Lo, Timanim follow Rambam. They really are allowed to warm up soup on Shabbat. Rambam holds you're allowed to. But this is talking about, the Gemara says, can you put water near the fire on Shabbat? Mevi Adam Kiton Umayim Umaniho Keneged Medura. You're allowed to put a pitcher of water near the fire. Just enough that it shouldn't be cold anymore. It can't be boiling. You could just make it a little bit warm.
Take the chill out.
Straight out Gemara. Take the chill out of the water. So the baby bottle, right? If you have kids at home, you have a baby bottle, you want to warm it up, you put the baby bottle at a distance from the fire that it would never get to boiling, but it would get warm. It is mutar on Shabbat.
It's only apply to a flame on a stovetop? Or can you put soup in the oven?
No, not talking about inside, on top of it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, okay. Now this is halacha l'maaseh. Rambam says this. I'm going to read you the same chapter in a second. Let's just read one more thing. I'm going to skip to, if you're with me, Shabbat. We'll turn to Amud Bet and read you the last part. It says on Amud Bet, on the bottom. Amar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera says, Anna hazitel Rabbi Abahu deshat be'ambate. I saw with my own eyes. Rabbi Abahu was floating or swimming in his bathtub on Shabbat. He's testifying. Rabbi Abahu. V'lo yadana I ikad I lo akad. I don't know if he took his feet off the ground or not. Maybe he kept his feet on the ground, and that's not considered swimming. Or maybe his feet. Now we're not talking about hot water. We're talking about cold water now. The Gemara says, "Peshita de lo akad." It must be he didn't take his feet off the water, off the ground. He must have kept his feet on the ground, and he didn't swim, because you're not allowed to swim on Shabbat, because you might make a raft. Tanya, lo yashut adam beberecha min ha'amayim, v'afil omed b'chasid. You cannot swim on Shabbat because you might make a raft. So it must be he kept his feet down. The Gemara says no. Lo kashya. Ha delit legedudeh, ha de'it legedudeh. No, this is where the Rambam came from. No, if there's no lip around the pool, there's no lip, there's no wall around the pool. It's flat. So the water is straight flat, flush onto the ground. Yeah, you can't go in that on Shabbat. Even cold, even in your backyard. But if there's a lip, and like we said, if there's a wall around, then the gezerah of swimming doesn't apply. So if it's cold water, you can pick up your feet and you can go in there on Shabbat. So far, so good? Okay, Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says as follows. Asur lirchotz kol gufo, Maran Shulchan Aruch. You cannot wash your whole body, even eved ve'eved, even body part by body part. Afil b'mayim shu hamum erev Shabbat, even with water that was heated up from before Shabbat, like we said. Ben imhem bekeli, ben imhem b'karka. It doesn't matter if it's water that was heated up. You cannot wash your body. Even to take a shower, to pour the water on the top of you, you're not allowed if it's warm. Like the Ramban said, if the water was heated from before Shabbat, you can wash your face and your legs and your hands with this water. And how that says you can wash the dishes also with this water.
My pool water is hot.
Okay, hold on, we'll get there 1 second. Yeshu Omrim, here. Siv Dalet. Maran Shulchan Aruch. Lo yishtatef adam betzonen kol gufo v'yithamem keneged hamedura. If you took a cold shower and you're all cold now, and you want to go in front of the fire now to warm you up while you're cold and wet, you can't do it. Because you're warming the water that's on top of you. You're warming the water, the cold water.
It's like the jacket when it's raining.
It's just like showering with a hot water. Taking a cold shower or dipping in a cold pool and standing right by the flame, by the heat, is not allowed. What does this tell you? It's a big chidush. And Tosafot says this. The Tosafot on Mem Amud Bet, Tosafot says, Asurin riba de dome kerohes b'mayim hamim v'yabol lehatam le'ahem hamim l'chos kufo. Even mayim poshrim, even warm water. Tosafot says you're not allowed on Shabbat. Warm water. So even if it's not boiling water, you warm the water. How warm is called warm water? Anybody know this halacha? This is a Ramah in the laws of Nida, and this halacha is pretty much like a trivia question. What's called warm water for Judaism? Huh? No. Yad soledet po is boiling water. No. That's Yad soledet po. No. You're not listening. Tosafot, we're not talking about Yad soledet po. The chidush here is you can't just say, oh, my pool is not Yad soledet po. My pool is not how is Yad soledet po. My pool is 109. No. Even mayim poshrim. Even warm water, Tosafot says you can't do it, and says what's warm water? The Ramah.
Go into it with that.
The Ramah in Yoreh De'ah, by the laws of Nida, writes the temperature of spit is warm water. The temperature of spit. It's not very hot. No. And so even this is a big chidush.
It is if you're swimming laps.
Even warm water, you're not allowed on Shabbat. Okay? Says Maran Shulchan Aruch. Okay, let's leave that one alone and skip it. Let me do one more. Siman 318. Warm water you're not allowed to put warm water on your body on Shabbat. It has to be cold. Cold, cold, cold. Even on Shabbat I'm talking, not Yom Tov. Shabbat only your hands, your feet, and your face. Not even parts of your body with warm. Only cold. And halacha ma'aseh. So 318 says Maran Shulchan Aruch. And pretty soon the Ashkenazim are going to be different than us, but so far everyone is the same. 318:14 says Shulchan Aruch. Good question. We're going to talk about that if we have time, maybe next week. Shulchan Aruch says, you guys are on the money. Mutar liten kiton shel mayim o shel sha'ad mashkim keneged ha'esh ta'afik sinatan. You're allowed to put liquids or water next to the fire to warm it up a little bit. ובלבד שיתנם נחוק מהאש בעניין שאינו יכול להתחמם באותו מקום עד שיצא לבוא. So it's a big hidush. You can't put it right next to the fire, which means if I left it there for a half hour, it would be boiling, but I'm going to make sure to pull it away in 1 minute. You can't do that. You have to put it at a distance that it can never get boiling. Get the halacha? Abal asud. Okay, let's skip that. By the way, look at this one. Mutar liten empanada, says Maran Shulchan Aruch. Empanada. Mutar liten empanada keneged ha'esh. You can heat up an empanada by the fire. We had this question a few weeks ago. We had a bar mitzvah, and they called me frantically Friday. Jasmine called me frantically on Friday. What do I do? They told me that I can't put the meatballs on Shabbat because the juice. I said, no. The juice is allowed according to Sfaradim. Sfaradim, the juice, as long as it's 49% juice, it's allowed with the meatballs and everything to go on Shabbat. So the empanada, Maran Shulchan says straight out, even though there's fat and juices that's going to boil, empanada, yeah, it's hundreds of years ago. Maran is over 500 years ago. Okay, Okay, ready? Now, I want to read you a Ramban. The question is as follows. This isur of warm water on Shabbat, there's a Mishnah in Yomah talking about Yom Kippur process, Daf Lamed Aleph. And the Mishnah says as follows. If the Kohen Gadol is an old man, why were you thinking about that? Says the Mishnah, if the Kohen Gadol is an old man, he has to go in the mikveh. We read about this in the Avodah. It's freezing. Why are we thinking about this? The Mishnah says, if the Kohen Gadol was an old man, or he was very picky and he would be freezing cold or get sick from the cold water, how many times do you have to go in the mikveh? So what they used to do is they used to heat up steel spigots from before Shabbat, like barbecue skewers picture. Make them really, really hot from before Yom Kippur, and then right before he goes in the mikveh, they put it in the water. And it would warm up the water on Yom Kippur for the Kohen Gadol. This is what the Mishnah says in Yomah. If you can do it on Yom Kippur, you should be able to do it on Shabbat. You can warm up the water so with the Sitira. So the Rambam, when he brings this halacha, he adds in a few words that's not in the Mishnah. The Rambam says, if the Kohen Gadol is old or sick, they would heat up these skewers from before, and then on Yom Kippur dip them in the water, so that you can take off the chill of the water. And here's the words that Rambam adds, that's not in the Mishnah.
There's no bezerah.
Very good. She'en shivut b'mikdash. There's no shvut in the Bet HaMikdash. What does that tell you? Why does Rambam add these three words? All the poskim talk about this. What is Rambam adding these three words for? To show you, don't you dare think you're allowed to warm water on Shabbat. Only because there's no shvut. The laws of Shabbat, of rabbinic Shabbat, doesn't apply in the Bet HaMikdash. That's why it's allowed. But if there was a shvut in the Bet HaMikdash, you would never be allowed to do this. Rambam went out of his way. A lot of the poskim talk about this to add these three words of shvut. Okay, so now we have to go back and talk about if you're in the pool on Shabbat and someone asked if it's solar, and another person asked, what about mikvah? How do you go to the mikvah on Shabbat? And so we have to address these things. Probably not all today. We'll just do like 5 more minutes, and then we'll finish it next week. It says in Hazon Avadia, this is by Chacham Avadia himself. He's talking about women. How do women go to the mikveh on Friday night? Women go to the mikveh Friday night. If it's their time for you have to go. If it's the time for the mitzvah, you have to go. But it's hot. How is it allowed for them? Everything we just read says you're not allowed to go in hot water on Friday night. And so it's a big tumult, as they say. And I'm going to read you just a few highlighted lines that I selected for you. The Pri Megadim says, Hamin she'hamu me'el Shabbat, afilu enam ela posherim, asur l'chos kol Shabbat. You cannot dip yourself or wash yourself in hot water on Shabbat, or even warm water on Shabbat. Like we said from the Rambam. In the Mahazeh Abraham, he writes, Hamin she'hamu me'el Shabbat, en isuro ela behamin v'lo beposherim. He says no. Warm water would be okay if it was from before Shabbat. He's arguing on this. And he said, but if the warm water was from before Shabbat, it's okay. But warm water on Shabbat is not okay. So there's a whole question of everyone's trying to find out how you can let a woman in a mikveh. The Sefer Menurat Teorah says, שהפשוט בדברי הרמב"ם והתוספות that we read to you, שאף בפושרים מערב שבת אסור לרחוץ בגופו. Even warm water you're not allowed on Shabbat. שגזרו עליו שלא יבוא לחמם בשבת. Because from the rabbis, you might heat up the water. And it says also in the Sefer Ben Ori, שדברי תוספות ברור. I just read you the Tosafot. It's straight out that water that's warm is the same deen as water that's hot. And so says the Mishnah Berurah as well. And then he brings this Rambam that I read to you. She'en shvut b'mikdash. Muchach midibarav. Is he from the Rambam's words? She'dafka b'mikdash etiru. Only the Beit HaMikdash you're allowed to dip in the hot water. Aba b'medina, outside the Beit HaMikdash, asud mishum gezot mitchasod. You cannot go in hot water or warm water on Shabbat. Ulefichach aslu b'medina b'chol gavni. Everywhere it's going to be asud outside the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. So the Bey Yosef writes that the reason why women dip in the mikveh on Shabbat is because it's a mitzvah alehen l'tbol. It's a mitzvah to go. V'ika tza'ara d'gufa l'tbol b'tzunan. And it's too hard. It's very difficult for them to dip in cold water. And in a b'mkom sa'ad, it would be allowed. It's a chidush. V'achinami. If she dips in cold water, she'll be suffering. There's a special permission for a woman on a mitzvah night to go dip in the hot water. We're going to allow it in the place of extreme sa'ad. The Lechem Mishneh writes a little bit more like lamdut. He says, why did they make it isur to take a hot shower or dip in hot water on Shabbat? It's a gezerah midrabanan because of the bathhouses. But that itself was a gezerah midrabanan. The bathhouses itself, they are not allowed to use water from Erev Shabbat as a mitzvah midrabanan. So it's two drabanans. So it's a double shvut. It's a double drabanan. There's a halacha. Shvut u'shvut b'mkom mitzvah would be allowed. And therefore, and if it's a mitzvah for the woman to go in, it's going to be allowed because it's a shvut of a shvut. It's a double drabanan. What about a man? How can a man go in hot water? Does anybody go in a mikvah on Shabbat? How does a man go in a hot mikvah on Shabbat? Is there a heter? The Rabbi Yad Yosef writes, Bimkom mitzvat ona lo gazru gezat b'chatzot. Another hidush. He says, no. When the rabbis originally made these announcements, they specifically said this doesn't apply to mikvah. It's even deeper. Never applied to mikvah night for women. If you tell the women they can't dip in hot water, they're not going to go. They're not going to go in the cold water. You're going to eradicate mikvah from Klal Yisrael. They did not have this in mind. I'm skipping forward. In the Sefer Binyan Tzion, he says, שהגזרה הייתה שלא לטבול בחמין עצמם שהוחמו על ידי האור, אבל במקום שהוחם על ידי מים חמים, it's going to be allowed. The mikvah is not heated by fire. It's heated by hot water that was heated by fire. Hot water goes into the mikvah. The mikvah itself is rainwater. They let in hot water from outside, from the other tank. That was heated by fire, and the hot water is heating the water. The water that she's in is like a double heat removal. That's how he's saying it's allowed. You can take it or leave it. The Sefer Shebitat Yom Tov says, Af al pi shebetefilat nashim shi mitzvah yesh makom devrehem. I understand all these reasons would apply to a woman on mikvah night. Mikom makom legabe anshe ma'aseh, regarding men who follow the Kabbalah, tzadikim, pious men, hasidim, shetovlim b'shabbat b'mikveh ham, en lehakel. There is no heter, he writes, for a man to go in a hot mikvah on Shabbat. What you're doing is not worth what you're losing. The gezerah of mikvah doesn't apply to men these days anymore. And so you're being mahmir, and you're being over on something that we just called you sinners for, and the gemara, it's not worth it. And so it's very hard to understand how a man can go on a hot mikvah on Shabbat. Halacha l'ma'aseh. Very, very difficult for a man to go on a hot mikvah on Shabbat. This was the Sefer Shevitat Yom Tov. And the Chalav talks about it longer. I'm not going to read everything. It's very, very, very great that a man can go on a hot mikvah on Shabbat. What's the heter? There's not a mitzvah for you to go on a mitzvah. You have to go cold. You should go cold. Sfaradim should go cold. I read that Chabad goes in hot, but for us, there's no reason to go on a hot mikvah.
They have the special one that's got the separation.
The water of the water of the water.
Yeah.
Hakam Tzvi says an idea. He says, let the women go in the hot mikvah, beben hashemashot. Not usually the mikvah opens by tzedek kavim, when it's already nighttime, later. So beforehand, I put in my phone Teichman mikvah. If you're still on this game over here with the mikvah game, you can make an appointment for your wife to go on the Teichman mikvah. You do it online. So you go to Teichman mikvah, look for the first available slot. Usually 8:45, 8:50, 8:30, nothing before that. Hacham Sevi says, why don't you go Ben Hashemashot, which is the gray area, 13 and a half minutes from after sunset, like right when Shabbat starts. Safek Yom Safek Laila. Maybe it's allowed, maybe it's not allowed. Add another Safek to this whole thing and let them go Ben Hashemashot in the mikvah. You're going to say, but they're not going on the right night? Says the Hacham Sevi, anything that's isur b'drabanan, lo gazru ala ben hashemashot, doesn't apply the gezerah in ben hashemashot. So you're free and clear to take a hot shower or a hot mikvah in ben hashemashot with water that was heated from beforehand. And even b'yom hashvi'i, even on Shabbat itself, he says, if a woman's mikvah night is Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night, while you're doing Seder Shlishi, she could be in the mikvah, even though Shabbat's not over, says Hacham Sevi. Says Hacham Vadia. This is the custom in Yerushalayim for the girls. By the Geonim, that ball b'yom hashvi'i b'erev b'ben hashemashot. They didn't wait till Shabbat was over like now. If your wife has to use the mikvah now, you won't see her until 9:30 p.m. earliest. Says the Chacham Vadia, in Yerushalayim, they always went early. Ben Hashemashot on Saturday. Like I said in the Sefer Bnei Binyamin. And this is his words. Ka'id Maran Malka sheminhag Ira Kodesh Yerushalayim. The custom of Ira Kodesh is she'anashim tovelot afil b'chol ben Hashemashot. Even on weeknights, they can go ben Hashemashot. It's okay to dip ben Hashemashot as long as the woman doesn't come home till tzet. It's more important that the woman doesn't come home. You can't be with your wife until this man is over, until tzet. But for her to dip in the mikvah ben hashemashot is not a problem. Chavadia writes, let her go by sundown. Just as long as she won't get home in time that they could be together before tzet, if she can make sure she gets home after tzet, no problem. וכן הוא בספר פרדס הגדול, ומכאן סיוע, for what the Beit Yosef writes, that the Rabbeinu Tam says, סמוך לחשיכה לאו דווקא. It doesn't matter, says the Rabbeinu Tam, that she has to dip at actual nightfall. אף קודם לכן היא יכולה לטבול אם אינה באה לביתה אשר חשיכה, says the Rabbeinu Tam and the Beit Yosef. As long as she'll get home late, it's okay if she dipped in the mikvah in bin hashemashot, which is 13 and a half minutes after sun, in the 13 and a half minutes starting sundown. Chamadat ends and he says, mitzvah lehaspid lebalaniyot. It's a mitzvah to teach the mikvah ladies who work in the mikvahs. Sheyipatihu sha'arehen be'erev shabbat mibe'od yom. They should open up the mikvah even when it's still light outside, right when sunset hits. Don't wait until 8:30 at night. It's better for the women to dip in ben hashemashot. You listen to us, you'll be good. Why? Because if you dip afterwards, you come into the gezerah of hot water on Shabbat. You're better off doing it in ben hashemashot. I went on the Teichman mikvah this Friday night. There's nothing before 8:30 p.m. And then I called Rabbi Gabai's mikvah, and I said, "When's the first time you can go on the mikvah?" They said, "Shikia." I said, "Beautiful." That's exactly what Chamadan said. Yeah, Itai. It's a fact, but it's a fact. They were right on the safeka on a gezerah drabanan. That the whole gezerah is ben drabanan. You can't do something that's a deoraita in ben shemashot, but it's a drabanan. The nidah itself. He said, "Ben Shemashot is okay. I don't want to get the whole nidah thing. It seems that it's fine. I don't know. I'm not going to the whole thing." And so, therefore, we have to wrap up for now. Therefore, we have to see as follows. We're not going to get the solar thing. We'll do that next week. We have to think about this. We talked about bathing suits on Shabbat, swimming on Shabbat, squeezing on Shabbat, the hair on Shabbat, the towel on Shabbat. What about hot water on Shabbat? That's what we have to think about. You got all those things are not a problem. But when the Rambam said he can swim in your pool on Shabbat, there were no heaters. Rambam was not using an electric heater in his pool. There was the sun. The sun is okay. We're talking about man-made fire, man-made heat. And so if you want to go in the pool on Shabbat, you have to ask yourself a question. Is the pool heated? If the pool is heated, is it heated today? You're in a hotel. Is the pool heated today? Is the heat on right now? If the heat is on right now on Shabbat, how could you go in? It's literally asur. A hotel pool on Shabbat, we'll talk about Yom Tov next week. On Shabbat, how could you go in a hotel pool on Shabbat if the heater's on? There's no way.
Heated by going.
But it's heated on Shabbat. This is the gezerah. So now the hotel's pretty much out for Shabbat. And my home pool I heated it on Friday.
Sorry, but anyway, without hot water, you don't have to go on Shabbat. That's what we learn.
Why? Oh, you're talking from the carrying. Okay, hold on. We have to talk about the eruv and all that stuff. Let's assume there's an eruv. Let's assume there's everything. My home pool, I heated it on Friday, and then I turned the heater off on Friday. That's ma'im shirachmum erev Shabbat. You're not allowed. You can't use it on Shabbat.
What Thursday?
So the question is, did you turn off the heat with enough time that the heat in the pool is only from natural sources, only from the sun? Now,
no heater.
Huh?
No heater.
If you put the heater on, you heated it up from
no
no heater. I didn't heat the pool on Shabbat. So the question is, like Liron said, okay, good. Is it a problem of rechitza, of washing for the Sephardim? Not really, because the water, if it's cold water, you're allowed to go in it. It has to have a lip. It has to have a lip. It has to have eruv, because you can't carry the droplets. Ashkenazim hold, the Mishnah Berurah writes, Ashkenazim hold, you can never wash on Shabbat, ever. Ashkenazim, ever. That's it, nothing.
Really carrying the droplets?
Yeah.
Isn't this the same thing with your head?
And so we'll have to talk about this. So next week we will talk about Yom Tov and Eruv, and we will talk about solar. But already we have some things in our head you have to check off.
So
As of right now, if your pool
you don't need to heater in the summer.
has no heater on,
Nobody does in the valley.
In the valley, nobody has stuff.
Before we finish right now, Ezra, listen. I'm going to read you the last word.
Anyway, the heat has the last two. Anyway.
What, the lip? It has, every pool has a lip.
No, but he's saying, is there a lip where it's like the pool's here and it has a lip over?
Yeah, it'll hold the water from going out.
Any pool.
Any- yeah.
What do they call those pools that?
Says Hacham Yitzhak Yosef. This is the part you're not going to like. Says, Ezra, are you listening? Says Hacham Yitzhak Yosef.
You can, but
Ulinyan halacha, halachically speaking. Af shesidadnu lehakel l'rachot beberecha b'Shabbat be'ezer ofani. We said how this is not a problem, this is not a problem, this is not a problem. Mikum makom lema'aseh yesh lehorot. You should teach people shelo l'rachot beberecha b'Shabbat, not to swim on Shabbat. Ubefrat bebeged yam, especially in a bathing suit. V'chen heshiv li maran avi umori shelita. And so told me my father, Hacham Ovadia. And that's all he says. We'll talk about this more next week in the El Yom Tov. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashya omer, ועשה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפיכך, הרבה להתראה מצוות שנאמר, I can't turn this off, Allah חפש למען כל ידיד תורה וידיד. קדיש? בכבוד. Hold on. Let me turn this off. End stream.